for everyone who deeply respects, loves, and reveres all things holy that honor God, for anyone who acknowledges His power and wishes to please and obey Him. This is the Salvation Report.
Salvation.
And now, here is your host, world-renowned author and researcher, Robert Stanley.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another Salvation Report. You have no idea how hard it was getting here to this point. I'll spare you the details, but anyway, today is July 5th, 2025. Hope you guys had a fabulous July 4th, Independence Day, whatever you call it. Safe and sane July 4th is always better than the alternative. So finally, I told you I was going to start having guests on, and that's been. It's easier to invite people than it is to actually run the software. I love technology when it works, but I'm still learning it. So bear with me if everything just goes completely south. It's my fault at this point because I'm still learning. All right. Anyway, just to be clear about that, let's see if I get this right too. That always helps. Okay. So I'm going to introduce our guest tonight. His name is Jerry Marzinski. He's got a lot of letters after his name, so I'm sure those are degrees. He has a BA, an M.Ed. I'll let him explain it. CMP. Jerry is a retired licensed psychotherapist with over 35 years of experience working with and studying the thought process and the voices heard by psychotic and criminally insane patients in some of the most volatile psychiatric institutions in the nation. He was awarded the State of Arizona's Meritorious Service Award while working in the psychology department of a large state prison. He was also awarded the Pima College's Apple Award for the teaching of abnormal psychology. Jerry has held the position of second lieutenant in the Arizona Civil Air Patrol, is a licensed commercial pilot, a certified scuba diver, and a long-distance motorcycle rider, which I'm jealous that he does that, and I don't anymore. He has also served as assistant scoutmaster. His formal academic training comprises a BA in psychology from Temple University, a master's degree in counseling from the University of Georgia, and 2 years of study in a PhD psychology program. He is the co-author of An Amazing Journey into the Psychotic Mind, Breaking the Spell of the Ivory Tower. His website, which I will link below on this page in my Substack, is jerrymarzinski.com. It's spelled Jerry, MARZINSKY.com. And I'll also link to their book on Amazon, An Amazing Journey into the Psychotic Mind. I remember reading that years ago. It was fascinating. So believe it or not, there you are, Jerry. Amazing. How you doing, my friend?
Thank you. It's been busy.
It's been far too long. Sorry about that.
Yeah, a lot to do with you getting me started off. I mean, I think you were the first broadcast that I agreed to, and I think I was still working for the psychology department at the prison at the time.
Right.
So I said, well, I'll do it, but you got to come up with a fake ID for me.
Yeah, right, Dr. J. Dr.
J. That's been following me around since then.
Yeah, so, Julius Erving was an amazing basketball player, if I believe that was his nickname. But anyway, you scored some points too against the dark side there with all that you brought to the table. And I know you're still doing that. And I apologize for not getting you back on for a while. But you know what? As you and I talked and experienced in the past, writing books and any way of exposing, like shows or articles, this information, exposing these spiritual parasites or whatever you want to call them, they get upset and they fight back, right? So I've had to be rather strategic about that, and I know you have too. And that's one of the reasons that sometimes I'm available on the internet and other times I'm not. I'm just, it's like any other contest, whether it just be sports or whatever. You cannot always be on offense. You have to go into defense mode unless you're just completely nuts, and then bad things usually happen. But so tell me what's been going on with you since last time we talked.
Well, I've been doing literally hundreds of podcasts. You sparked it off,
Yeah.
and then people started writing to me and saying, "Hey, listen, I'd like you to speak. I heard you on Robert Stanley."
Yeah.
And then it just, the more I did, the more it snowballed. Now I'm speaking to people all over the world.
Wow.
Doing the same kind of podcasting thing, exposing the deep state psychiatric mafia, big pharma.
Yeah, those guys.
And the ineffectiveness of the mental health system in the U.S. I mean, it's garbage. It's just total garbage. So those medicines that the psychiatric mafia are pushing on everybody don't cure anything.
Yeah.
All they do is tamp down symptoms, and that's the way they want it. They don't want to cure anything. They don't want to lose customers, so they just keep tamping down.
Okay, since you brought it up, this was in the news yesterday. This man says in Germany that he heard voices telling him to kill, and it's absolutely brutal. I'm not going to go into all the details. I'll link to it below on my Substack for people that want to read it. But he says right here in court, he said he claimed the voices in his head ordered him to commit the crime, literally murder.
Okay. That is not unusual. That happens a lot. And the courts go, oh, well, you're crazy. We're sending you to prison. So the prison is full of these kind of people.
And that's the kind of people you dealt with, right?
Yeah, a lot of them are the kind of people I dealt with.
Wow.
And then I spent the last 10 years working psych crisis in emergency in large hospitals in Tucson, working in the emergency room. So these guys were coming in totally undrugged, just raw, off the streets. I mean,
yeah.
Lots of times the police were just dragging them in there and saying, do something with this guy.
So well, I don't know how it is in Germany, but if that guy did that here, would he be put on Thorazine or something like that?
Yeah, the psychiatric mafia will drug anybody who walks into their office. You go into any psychiatrist's office and you will come out with a diagnosis and a prescription. and people don't know. They treat those that DSM-5, that directory of mental illnesses, as a Bible. Mm-hmm. That's the way it was treated in graduate school. It's the Bible. You need to memorize this. You have to know the major categories. It's all made up. It's totally made up by a group of psychiatrists that meet once every 3 years. Yeah. They make these things up. I mean, it's a scam.
Is it just? Well, I think we talked about this before, but it's been a while. So, do you, in your opinion, is this just to sell drugs, or is there's a deeper, insidious undercurrent?
Well, they want you to think that they know something. Mm-hmm. Like they know the cause of these mental illnesses, but everything for them comes down to drugs. And you look at their Bible. I mean, back in 1952, there were 106 psychiatric classifications in their DSM.
Okay.
In 1980, there were 256. Now, in the DSM-5, there's 297, almost 300.
Wow.
These are all made up by a group of psychiatrists, 2/3 of which are in league with Big Pharma. So wow. I heard that it was like a tobacco barn. They all meet together. They go, oh, I got a new mental illness, and they say what it is, and then they determine whether they can make a medicine for it or they already have some kind of drug for it. It's all centered around drugs. The whole mental health system is it's centered around falsity. You got in the United States, you got close to 50,000 people killing themselves every year.
Right.
And it's growing.
And a lot of those, I think the majority are veterans, or is it now it's switched to younger people?
No, there's a lot of veterans. But overall, close to 50,000 people.
Right. Wow.
A lot of them on antipsychotic drugs, antidepressant drugs.
Right.
And the mental health population in the U.S. is growing. It's not getting any any better. It's growing.
Right.
So you got more psychiatrists, you got more psychologists, you got more psychiatric drugs on the planet than in the entire history of mankind.
But
And
you
yet,
have more people that are crazy or
yep,
suffering.
yep,
No, they're not crazy.
well, they're mentally ill.
They're mentally ill. Yeah. Yeah.
Or schizophrenic, and
And
they're killing themselves. I mean, 50,000 people a year. That's what died in Vietnam over what, 10 years?
that's
That's year after year after year after year. This is happening. What does that say about the mental health system in our country
well. There's
and in the Western world? Even?
yeah. There's a spiritual component. That's how you and I met.
Yes.
Because I was coming at it from that angle because I don't have all the degrees that you do, but I have some experience dealing with this, and I still remember one of the therapies or protocols that you came up with was a rubber band, which
Oh, yeah.
that just sounds, come on, that can't be right, but it was effective,
It
right?
only works temporarily.
Okay, but it's
You
still
know?
it was a step in the right direction, at least, that you were able to give them a tool, these people that were suffering,
Yeah.
and give them some control.
See, what happened when I got out of graduate school? I went to work for one of the biggest psychiatric hospitals in the world. There were
Mhm.
like 10,000 patients there when I got there.
Wow.
Every kind of mental illness known to man was somewhere in there.
Right.
And I was an adrenaline junkie, going, "Yeah, this is great. You know, I'm gonna finally get to look at what this mental illness actually is." Because all through college and graduate school, you could not get access to a mental health population. You know,
Wow.
you had to believe for 4 years in undergraduate psychology, you had to believe everything that they were telling you was the truth. And I didn't trust the authority as far as I could throw them. So it was real hard for me to just, okay, this is the truth, this is the truth, this isn't the truth. You know,
Right.
you couldn't get access to a mental health center. You go to a mental health center, hey, I want to talk to some schizophrenic. Oh, no, we don't want to take the risk. Or you go to a hospital emergency room. Oh, no, we can't let you in here. You know, it's too much of a challenge. It's too dangerous. You know, they will not. In the entire 3-4 decades that I've been working mental health, I have never seen a researcher, a psychiatric or psychological researcher on the front lines ever. They won't allow them in.
Who is they?
The authorities.
And I mean, but can you be more specific, please, for people that don't know?
Well, if you try to get into a prison and say, hey, listen, I want to talk to some of your, psychotic inmates.
Oh, I see.
You wouldn't ever be given permission. Same thing with the mental health center. Same thing with a psychiatric hospital. You would never be given permission.
Got
You're not allowed. So here for 4 years of undergraduate and 2 years of graduate school, and then into the PhD program. Even we didn't have access to a clinical population, so we could see what was going on. You just had to believe what the academics are telling you.
Right.
And all the while you're being brainwashed. Hey, this is what's going on. This is what's going on.
Right.
I remember in undergraduate school in clinical, it was abnormal psychology. The professor assigned us a paper written by a clinical psychologist saying that if two psychotic patients met and say they were both thought they were Macron, one of them would have to give way and change into something else. They couldn't have the same delusion. And even as an undergraduate, I'm going, well, why would that be? They're both nuts.
Right.
Why would one of them have to logically change into something else because somebody else had taken that identification, which wasn't his in the first place? I mean, it just made no sense to me. So I had no access to see for myself. So fast forward probably 8 to 10 years, I tucked that away in the back of my head. And I was doing rounds on a large psychiatric unit that I was assigned to. And here's one of the patients carrying on a full-blown conversation with somebody or something I couldn't see.
Wow.
So it was like listening to one side of a telephone conversation. You could hear what the person talking on the phone was saying, but you couldn't hear what was coming in. And I saw that time after time after time, and I'm like, what's going on here? Because what we were taught in undergraduate and graduate school was that the voices were hallucinations.
Right.
And when you think about hallucinations, you think of like word salad. Just doesn't make any sense.
Or dreams that are just the kind of random.
It don't make any sense. It's like, but this guy's carrying on a full blown conversation with somebody or something that I couldn't see. Walking across and I'd seen that earlier where one woman was arguing with somebody, telling whatever she was hearing that she didn't want to leave the hospital grounds as she was walking off the hospital grounds, carrying on this conversation.
Wow.
With whatever it was she was talking to. So I'm like, what is going on there? And eventually it came to my attention that the voices that schizophrenics were hearing were not random hallucinations. These things were they were coherent conversations. So here's what, let me see. This is from the internet. This is what they know about the voices. This is what the psychiatric mafia knows about the voices.
Okay.
They're male or female. They can be spoken by a person who is known or unknown. They sound, instead of human voices, they have a humming sound. So this is where the voices kind of catapult off a sound in the background because they often don't have enough energy to impact the person. So they'll ride the noise coming in from a fan or static on a TV.
Wow.
Or some background noise. They use it to teleport themselves.
Wow.
So it can be spoken by a person with a foreign accent. I've never heard the voices speak with a foreign accent. So it doesn't do or speak a foreign language because it doesn't do any good for them to do that because they can't influence the person.
Right.
So they can be negative and disturbing, ongoing or intermittent, spoken by one person, by more than one person at the same time, commenting or criticizing or giving commands. That's all they know about them. That's pitiful. It's totally pitiful. They haven't done any research on the voices at all. So one thing that surprised me when, going back to this guy that was talking on the ward, I tried to sneak up on him to hear what he was doing. Who is he talking to?
Yeah.
Because I thought the voices were word cabbage, word salad. They wouldn't make any sense. But this guy's carrying on a full-blown conversation with somebody, and he's walking around the day room talking to this whatever it is.
Yeah.
So I tried to creep up behind him to kind of listen in on what was saying. He caught me. And he turned around, and I said, hey, you're new here. I haven't seen you before. And he goes, yeah, I just got in the other day. And I said, well, I'm Jerry. I'm the psych for this unit. Glad to meet you. I said, what's your name? And he looked me in the eye and he says, I'm Jesus Christ.
Of course.
And I went, okay.
Nice to meet you.
Then I looked at him and I said, no, you can't be Jesus Christ because I am. And I'm sitting there, what's he going to do? Is what that clinical psychiatrist said going to come true? This is the first chance I had to test that out.
Right.
So this guy's standing there and he cocks his eyes up and he's thinking about it.
Yeah.
And then he looks at me and he goes, okay, we can both be Jesus Christ. And he strolls off. I went, what else did they lie to me about?
Yeah.
What other lies? I found out later that 80% of what psychologists publish is non-replicable. So that means it's garbage. It's trash.
It's not science, in other words.
Well, I remember when I was in the PhD program, second year.
Yeah.
Okay, here comes the head of the department, used to be a preacher, and he calls in all the second year students, and he starts giving us a lecture, on statistics.
Okay.
And he's describing the bottom 10% of a population and with his mathematics as if that's the entire population. I'm like, wait a minute. I'm no statistics expert, but I've had it rammed down my throat for years.
Yeah.
That doesn't make any sense.
Right.
So I raised my hand. I said, well, wait a minute. You're describing the top 10% of this population, just this segment, as if it applies to the whole population. How, how can you do that? I'll never forget his response. He said, if they're too stupid to catch it, that's their fault. I was stunned. I was absolutely stunned. And I look around and all the other students are looking at him like, oh, so that's how it's done. There's one other guy, Tom, that he looked at me, I looked at him, and we're both going, like that. And we had to break it off real quick before he saw us.
Yeah. Wow.
So, they lie with statistics. They publish or perish is their theme song.
Right, but you said it's not replicable in a, and if that's the case, I thought that was a big part of science, was it has to be repeatable.
It has to be replicable. That's exactly right. So if it's not repeatable, it's garbage.
Okay.
Well, 80% of what they were publishing.
Mm-hmm.
This was a major research outfit. I forgot which one it was, but they sampled a ton of research, psychology research. They couldn't replicate it. I mean, it was garbage. It was trash.
Yeah. Wow.
And I remember when I was in the master's program, I wanted to do some research on depression. And I told my advisor, I said, I'd like to do some novel research on depression. He said, no, don't do that. Just replicate this research that's already been done and just cast your lot one way or the other. I said, I don't want to waste my time doing that. I'm thinking to myself, what's going on with this? No. And the other thing that surprised me is by the time I got into that PhD program, I had 7 years under my belt on the front lines in that huge psychiatric hospital. On the very front lines, they're dealing with everything, and what they were teaching just didn't appear in reality. And it wasn't useful as far as all these psychological theories, these counseling theories and stuff. You apply those theories to schizophrenics. It's like shooting a rhino in the butt with a BB rifle. It just has no effect.
Yeah.
And so it was like, okay, well, why are these guys crazy? What is going on in their heads?
Right.
I noticed even when I got to the that big psychiatric hospital, nobody was interested in finding out what was going on in their heads. They already knew. They were already brainwashed by, the educational system, which had been taken over, back in the late 1800s by big pharma.
Right. And that's true for all the medical divisions.
Yes.
With allopathic medicine, right?
Yep.
Wow.
They were taken over. I think the head of Standard Oil.
Yeah, Rockefellers.
They were taken over by Rockefellers, and Rockefellers paid for this big research project that, attempted to show that the only valid treatment for mental illness is drugs.
Wow.
Okay? So a lot of those drugs were made from oil.
Yeah, right.
So here they are pushing that. They took over the entire mental health system at that point.
Wow.
They made stuff like acupuncture illegal. They made naturopathy illegal. They made the Tesla violet ray illegal. I mean, all this stuff. And any physician that referred to a naturopath was drummed out of the APA.
Well, but they couldn't prevent some people, like myself, who recently went through a deliverance. Not that so my understanding is people can be possessed, but they can also be oppressed. And I believe I fall into the second category. And it's not all the time, but you remember when we first met how I was being attacked and you were being attacked, and every Sherry and everybody who was trying to help was being attacked. So, but the way to get them out and stay out is, in my opinion, is biblical or spiritual. It's not religious, but it is a component of this. What I guess the only way to say it that makes any sense to me is the war in heaven is where this all started. It didn't start here on earth, but it is my understanding is the conclusion, the final aspect of this conflict is here, and that's why so many people are suffering.
Yeah, and you look at it, and I started studying the voices. When I found that nobody was interested in it. You know, it's like there was a correlation between these people acting out and how strong their voices were and how much they listened to. And the
Right.
only thing they had, this was back in the 70s, the only thing they had to treat these voices were those antipsychotic drugs.
Hmm.
Right? So these are major tranquilizers.
Right.
Right? And they didn't get rid of the psychosis. They only got rid of the symptoms. Right?
Well,
And
yeah,
this,
but you told me that it just basically wiped the person out.
that turned them into zombies a lot of time.
Yeah, like
You
almost like
know,
a chemical lobotomy.
well, yeah, it was. It
Wow.
was
Well, I
like
mean,
a
in some
chemical,
cases, yeah, sure.
you know, and I had a list of the side effects. Here's Thorazine side effects. That's what they were using Thorazine when I was there. They were using Stelazine. These are the side effects of these meds. So these
Okay.
meds are toxic.
Really?
They,
Yeah,
they
no
are they
kidding.
are they are poisonous. And
Literally,
these
yeah.
literally, and these side effects are the effects of being poisoned.
Yeah.
So it's this is for Thorazine. Um, Dizziness, drowsiness, anxiety, sleep problems, insomnia, breast swelling or discharge, changes in menstrual period, weight gain, swelling in the hands and feet, dry mouth, stuffy nose, blurred vision, constipation. Um, these things can pass through the milk into a kid.
Oh, wow.
Um, so they are toxic. Other side effects are uncontrolled muscle movements in the jaw, um, blinking movements, darting tongue, stiffness in the neck, um, lightness in the throat, trouble breathing or swallowing, lightheadedness, like feeling like you might pass out, confusion, agitation, feeling jittery, trouble sleeping, weakness, um, seizures, jaundice, low white blood cell count,
Oh, wow. That's really dangerous.
yeah, echinacea, uh, constipation, impotence. Um, so it goes on and on.
But that's true for all pharmaceutical drugs. They have the tremendous amount of side effects,
Yeah,
so-called
but
side
but
effects.
but not like these. I mean,
Not not like
these
us.
are heavy duty.
Yeah.
Now, what they found in the researchers when they got around to doing autopsies on patients that have been in the state hospital for years, okay,
Hmm.
taking these drugs, when they did autopsies on them, they found their brains were shrunk like walnuts, one after another, after another, after another. So they published their findings, and they went, "Well, we're finding this with people that are on phenothiazines, but all these other different kind of mental illness patients, they don't have that effect. It's only
Are
the
you
ones that are taking antipsychotic drugs."
are you saying the size of a walnut?
No, no,
No.
like a walnut, not
Oh,
the
it
size
was
of a walnut. They're
he-
shrunk.
so it looked more convoluted or something like a
Yeah,
walnut. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
It
Huh.
wasn't the size of a walnut, but
Okay.
it was significantly smaller than the human brain should have been.
Okay. Well, that's not good.
And they were finding that time after time after time after time. You know? So they published on it. And of
Wow.
course, you got the psychiatric mafia and big pharma and taking over higher educational systems. They don't want that. They want you
Right.
taking these drugs over and over and over again, so they make a fortune on them. Just treating the symptoms, never getting to the cause.
Yeah. Are you saying med school? Is that what you're talking about?
Oh yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. That I understood.
they've
Sure.
taken over. They've taken over psychiatry. They've taken over.
Everything.
It's all physical, all physical. So they're having a
Yeah.
lot of
Right.
trouble with psychiatry because they can't figure out what's going on with these people. They don't have a cure for any mental illness right now. All they have is these different kinds of drugs that just tamp down the symptoms.
Allegedly, but this is true for like, okay, so I had a crash course in cancer this year. Not because I wanted to, but I had to. Okay, that's like most people, and then unfortunately, it's rampant right now, right? It's epidemic around the planet. But the bottom line is that the current medical system is not treating the cause. They're acting like they don't know the cause. I kind of believe they do, but that's irrelevant. They're not publishing it. They have a lot of theories, especially for the more rare versions of it, but it's all symptomatic in the sense in this that's all they're doing. they're only treating the symptoms, and even then they don't do it effectively, but they're making a fortune off of it, obviously. So it's an industry. It's an industry.
Billions of dollars a year.
Yeah.
Billions. I have the exact figures here from before. It's like $14.7 billion. We're talking billion, not million, billion.
Yeah. That seems kind of low, but okay.
And that was years ago.
Oh, okay. That's why.
That was like 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah, it skyrocketed after they introduced the so-called gene therapy.
Oh, that's
mandatory. Well, allegedly mandatory gene therapy. Even for people that were asymptomatic, which that is unprecedented. And I'm not a doctor, people. You know that. I'm just not an idiot either.
Oh, here it is.
What?
Antipsychotic drug market in the U.S. is expected to reach $15.98 billion by 2023. Not million.
Right.
Billion.
Right.
These drugs don't cure anything. All they do is treat symptoms. These people do not want a cure for schizophrenia or mental illness. They want to keep selling their drugs. They're making a fortune doing this.
Wow.
Global antipsychotic drug sales hit $14.54 billion in 2021 and is expected to reach $15.5 billion by 2022. This is years ago.
Yeah, it increased during COVID. People were absolutely depressed and kind of freaked out. Obviously, couldn't go outside or whatever, see their family. That was so evil. Anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know you know that.
Yeah. So they made up that entire DSM. It's completely fabricated.
Mm-hmm.
And they make up more every year. Every time they meet, they come up with new mental illnesses. And some of the stupid ones they came up with, and they call everything a disorder.
Okay.
They came up with mathematics disorder. So if you don't like math, you're disordered.
Well, that's me. Yeah, okay.
Me too. Here's another one. Caffeine intoxication disorder. You drink too much coffee, you're disordered.
Okay, I'm guilty on that one too, or at least I used to be.
Sibling relational disorder. So a couple of kids are fighting all the time. They're disordered.
Okay, that's 3 strikes for me.
This one might be a hurdle for you. Sexual disorientation disturbance, which is homosexuality.
Okay. So they renamed that now.
They renamed it.
That's a disorder now?
That's a disorder.
Okay.
Florence syndrome. Okay. This is actually in there. What? Being overwhelmed by beauty, such as in Florence, Italy.
Oh, come on.
The symptoms are fainting and dizziness. The suggested treatment is antidepressants.
Well, of course.
Paris syndrome, mostly experienced by Japanese visiting France. Symptoms include anxiety, feelings of persecution, which in my day they would call that cultural shock.
Yeah, absolutely lost in translation.
So these guys are dreaming up these labels. I mean, they treat it like these things are actual illnesses. In fact, they just bleed into one another.
Right.
All of us who took abnormal psychology as we were going through, it's like, well, I got that, and I got that, and I got that, and I got that.
Yeah, it's part of the human condition.
Yeah, they're not clean, clean cut categories.
Right.
Which are like these guys are, they need a diagnosis to charge the insurance companies.
Oh, of course.
They don't get paid if they don't have a diagnosis, and the more illnesses that they can convince insurance companies to pay for, the richer they get.
Okay, there's one other example I wanted to, and it's really unfortunate. Let's see if I can get there. Where are we? Are we just seeing? Oh, that's not this one. Oh, so I told you I'm still learning this, but I want to show you. This happened last year. Of course, this guy. I don't know if you remember this. This guy said he didn't even remember doing what he did, which was basically set a woman on fire in the subway. And I believe he acted like he really didn't remember it.
Well, that happens a lot. They don't remember because they didn't do it. The voices did it.
Right.
But the courts don't believe that these guys are under control of some other force, some other influence.
Right. They can't prosecute a
Yeah,
voice
so
in somebody's head. Sorry,
right.
it's
So
not
what they
funny.
do is they lock up the person and they lock up the voices, and that's where I got to meet them in the prison.
Uh-huh.
The
Uh-huh.
prison was full of these kind of guys,
Wow.
you know. So, but it was a perfect place to do the research because what I ran into in the state hospital is when I found out. Well, the first thing I found out is that here are psychiatrists, and this is what I believed when I got there too, because I was brainwashed in master's program also to
Mm-hmm.
believe that all this mental illness was due to a biochemical brain imbalance. Right? So here I get on this big psychiatric hospital. I mean, I think there was like 3,000 acres associated with there, over 200 buildings. It was massive. It was the size of a small city.
Wow.
Central State Hospital, Milledgeville, Georgia. So got there, and nothing in undergraduate or graduate school prepared me for it was like. I may as well not have gone there. I mean, it was like this was a whole different ballpark. Um, so I was watching these guys respond to these voices and get in trouble. So there was a one-to-one correlation between the amount of trouble they got into and how strong their voices were and how often they were listening to them. So I'm
Right.
like, well, what are these things? Everybody believed, oh, they're just hallucinations. Psychiatrists, I saw over and over again, psychiatrists tell patients, they're just hallucinations, ignore them. You know, don't pay any attention to them. So what I do is I'd call those guys in afterwards when we weren't in the psychiatrist's office. I said, Dr. So-and-so said just ignore them. How's that working for you? He goes, it's not. It's not. I said, well, what happens? He said they got worse. If I try to ignore them, they get louder, they get more persistent. And that was standard. I mean, that happened time after time after time after time. Ignoring them doesn't work. They won't be ignored. They get louder, they get more persistent, they get more aggressive.
And that's an indication of a personality
Oh, yeah,
type. Yeah.
that's a personality type. It's a nasty one, you know.
Yes. Yeah,
So,
control. We call them control freaks, but or whatever. You probably have not whatever the other terminology, but it just sounds to me like, why would a person hallucinate like that in that way? Doesn't make any sense.
well, you go, and that's one of the first things I noticed with these things was that they were consistently negative. When I started
Ah,
asking patients about, you know, what are they telling you? What's the deal? Now they didn't want to tell me. I found out later that the voices didn't want me to know. And there was one
right.
guy that told me, he said, the voices told me not to talk to you. They said, you already know too much.
Whoa.
And I'm like, that's a hallucination saying that?
No.
So that blew me. But I didn't want to believe that these things were anything but a hallucination, but I
Yeah.
wanted to see what they were saying. So I ran into a lot of resistance because, first of all, the psychiatry used us, the master's level people, as spies. So if we spotted a mental patient who was getting out of control, it was our job to turn them into psychiatry, who would then call them in and drug them more.
Wow.
Okay, so it all revolved around drugs. There wasn't, you know, I found that since I graduated from a rehabilitation counseling program, master's program, our job was to kind of try to get these guys straightened out, get them stabilized on their meds, and get them out of the hospital. But
And
what
then
I
what?
well,
Then
what
what?
we would train them. I mean, so we would,
Oh,
they had vocational
uh,
classes like a
okay.
beautician or auto mechanics or janitor or something like that.
Okay, I
So,
would not
so,
want anybody like that messing with my car. Sorry.
so our job was out in the units, out in the psychiatric units, was to hunt these people up and send them into the vocational rehabilitation program for
Uh-huh.
training. You know, and of course they needed to stay on their meds. Probably the most advanced, the best candidates were the schizophrenics when they were on their medications.
Huh.
They could function relatively normally. But
Right.
if they went off their meds, within a week or 2 weeks, man, they were right back to being crazy again, just out of control. You know?
Wow.
So it was like And I watched time after time after time as my students were approaching graduation. They would go off their meds, and the voices would take over, and they just blow the whole thing. They get kicked out of class. They get discharged. They sabotage themselves. And I'm like, well, why is that happening? And why is it happening just before they graduate?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I started asking them, and of course they said, "Oh, well, I went off the meds because of the side effects." And I read you the side effects.
Right.
They're awful. I mean, that's
Right.
a legitimate excuse. But then I went to the DSM and got experiences that I saw myself. All the examples of what it was like to be psychotic. The voices attacking you, the auditory and visual hallucinations, the paranoia, the seeing monsters, the shadow people, the feeling people were going to murder you at night, feeling you were all this stuff associated with psychosis. Right?
Right.
I made a check sheet of that. And after the people on my caseload, when they went off their meds and they were reconstituted, I'd bring them in and I'd say, why'd you go off your meds? They said, well, the side effects were awful. Okay, given. I gave them a blank sheet of paper. I said, write down all the side effects that you experienced, because they didn't all experience the same side effects.
Right.
So they'd write down, 3, 4, 5 side effects. I'd take that sheet, and then I'd give them the check sheet of what it was like to be psychotic. The voices, the horror show of psychosis. I said, okay, put a check near each one of these things that you experienced when you were psychotic. They check a whole bunch of them off, and then I'd give them both back to them. And I said, which one's worse? Every single one of them said being psychotic was worse. Every single one.
Right.
And then I'd ask them, say, well, then why did you go off your meds?
Right.
Guess what their answer was?
The voices told me. Sorry, you already told me. The voices told them not to, right?
Well,
or to do it, right?
But the answer to that question was, I don't know.
Oh, really? In that case,
Yeah.
okay. I thought before
in that case, yeah. There's another one where that was 7 years later.
Was it different? Oh, that was a different clinic or setting
that was the same setting, but it was
7 years later. I thought you told me a bunch of people the voices were telling them, don't take your meds, and they were hiding them in like a banister or something.
Yep. Oh yeah, that was a banister
wild.
story. So that was another thing I saw. I was walking on the first floor of this big psychiatric unit.
Yeah.
And here was a maintenance man, for some reason, cutting. He had a grinder, and he was cutting off the cap to the bottom of this banister in the psychiatric unit.
Yeah.
So this banister ran up to the second floor, and I already knew that the cap on the second floor wasn't there. That was unusual. Usually there was a cap on all those banisters.
Sure.
The one on the second floor didn't have a cap. So here's all the smoke and sparks and stuff flying, and here's all the patients standing around watching this. It was the most exciting thing going on at the time.
Yeah.
So I just jumped in and was joining them, and I was watching the show. All these sparks flying all over the place in the smoke, and then the cap fell off that banister, and then the surprise of my life happened. It was like thousands of psychiatric pills started pouring out of that banister, all different colors, all different shapes, all different kinds, and they just were like a waterfall, just coming out of that banister for a long time. And they were spreading out all over the floor. And I'm like, holy cow, this is like each one of those pills was and most of them, I looked at a lot of them were antipsychotics. Each one of them was a vote for a patient to stay psychotic.
Wow.
And I'm like, well, why is that going on? It was completely perplexing.
Yeah.
These drugs back in the 70s, they were the only thing we had that would bring these people back to sanity, or some of them, and it would subdue the rest, keep them under control. So they were major tranquilizers. They were dumbing these people down, and the voices I later found were ramping them up. Okay.
Yeah.
So I was like, well, why is that happening? Why are they choosing to remain psychotic? So I would started asking them, and they'd say, well, it's the side effects. And then I gave them that second sheet of paper with all this, symptoms of being floridly psychotic. they all agreed that being psychotic was worse than taking the medicines.
Wow.
And then I'd ask, well, why didn't you take your medicines?
Mm-hmm.
They would say, I don't know. Every single one of them would say, I don't know. That went on for 3 freaking years.
Wow.
You know, I felt like a lunatic asking them over and over again, giving them both the sheets.
Yeah.
And why'd you go off your meds? I don't know. You know,
or they didn't want to tell you.
Well, it felt like honestly they didn't know.
Okay,
You know?
but
so at
you
the
found
end of,
out eventually.
Yeah, at the end of 7 years, and I heard before, you know, that a lot of these guys felt that the psychiatrist was poisoning.
Well,
You know?
they were, right?
Yeah, they were. These drugs are toxic. They were. But this one gal, this was the 7th year I was there. She went off her meds for the 3rd time, and she was doing good. She was about to graduate with a full degree from the cosmetology program. She could become a state licensed cosmetologist, and she blew it. You know? So I'm like, God darn, you know, what's the deal? So I had to call her mother and tell her, listen, we're discharging your daughter. She went off her meds for the 3rd time, and if she won't take her meds when they're being handed to her on a platter,
yeah,
she's not going to go through the trouble to go to a mental health center and get them somewhere else. You know, if she's not taking them when they're being handed to her, we have to discharge her.
wow.
So the mother just begged me, she, please don't do that. I can't deal with her. I tried before. I can't do it. You know, I'll come up there and we'll find out why she went off her meds. And I'm like, good. I got an ally. Somebody who's going to help me try to find out what the frick happened with these people.
Yeah.
So I said, come on up next Friday and we'll talk to her in the afternoon. So she drove, it was a long drive for her, like 3 or 4 hours. She drove up here and I was sitting talking to her, and then we brought the patient in and told her, hey, you're about to be discharged. Your mother and I both want to know, why did you go off your meds again when you knew what would happen? This has happened to you numerous times before. You knew that if you went off it the 3rd time, you already had 2 strikes against you, and you did it anyway with a 3rd strike, and now by regulation we have to discharge you. And the mother and I are both asking her, why did you do that? You know, the mother's just begging her, tell us, why'd you do that? And she says, you wouldn't believe me. And I said, well, try me. I've heard a lot of weird stuff since I've been working here. I don't think you're going to throw me off my kilter.
Yeah.
You know? And she said, all right. The voices told me that the psychiatrist was poisoning me and not to take the medications. I was being poisoned. And I'd heard that from so many other patients before. The psychiatrist was poisoning me.
Right.
One thing that really puzzled me is that back in the 70s, we didn't have cell phones. We had the dial-up phones. So everybody would meet in the central kitchen since there was no McDonald's in town. I mean, this was a small town in the middle of Georgia, in the middle of nowhere in the sticks. So we all ate at the central kitchen there, and people from all the units all around the hospital would meet. And one thing I found was that the psychiatrists were always getting assaulted. Not psych nurses, not psychologists, not counselors, not regular nurses, not chaplains, nobody. It was psychiatrists. And I'm like, why psychiatrists? They're only spending 15 or 20 minutes a month with these people. What the frick are they saying to these people in 20 minutes or 15 minutes that's getting them assaulted? It clicked into place when she said, the voices were telling me that the psychiatrists are poisoning me. So I've heard that before, which they are.
They were, yes.
Which they were. And the voices pointed to the side effects of those medications that I read you as proof that they were being poisoned. And indeed they were.
Yeah.
Those medications were toxic. And I already told you about the long-term effect of them. They destroy your central nervous system. This is irreparable damage with long-term use. And here's psychiatrists telling patients even now, you're schizophrenic, that's a life sentence. There's nothing else you can do about it.
Wow.
All you can you just take our toxic meds and come in and pay us $200 every month to prescribe them for you. And on top of that, the big pharma, you're talking about maybe $800 for if you didn't have insurance
Oh,
for a month's worth of these pills to keep you sane.
wow.
Right? Plus another 200 or so to see a psychiatrist. So you're talking $1,000 if you don't have insurance to stay sane for a month. You go across the border to Mexico, you can get the same drugs manufactured often by the same drug companies for $75. That's how bad
Per month?
big for a month.
Huh.
Yes,
Wow.
that's how bad Big Pharma is ripping off the people in the United States. Trump just caught up with them just not too long ago and made an order saying Big Pharma is not allowed to charge U.S. citizens any more than the lowest paid country is being charged.
Yeah.
And they were still making profit even then.
Yeah, of course.
So thank God he stepped in. And you wonder why the medical bills in the U.S. are so astronomical. It's because of this friggin' fraud.
Yeah.
I mean, they're just so fraudulent.
Yeah.
And
So
they're making a fortune.
okay, so we've discussed how this subdues or sedates people, the pharmaceutical drugs. What about illegal drugs actually amplifying the schizophrenia or these voices or non-physical entities?
Yeah, schizophrenia is not a physiological problem.
Okay.
Okay, that's one of the things that I saw. They hammered into our heads in graduate school. Schizophrenia is a biochemical brain imbalance. And that's what all that you look it up on the internet. They're still telling that
To this
lie.
day, yes, I
To
know.
this lie, they're still telling that to this day.
Yeah.
But one thing I noticed is when I was in the psychiatrist's office with my patients, and they were being evaluated, the psychiatrist go, well, you're hearing voices, and kind of ask them some of those things about schizophrenia, some of the symptoms, and then right away they prescribe a medication. And after I saw this a few times, I'm saying, well, if schizophrenia is a biochemical brain imbalance, why aren't these guys given some kind of lab test to find out what chemicals in the brain, which neurotransmitters are out of kilter, by how much?
Right.
Never happened. It's like, what about a lab test? I mean, what about EEG, EKG, some kind of objective test to determine which chemicals are out of balance by how much?
Right.
Didn't exist. Never existed. They don't even know what the chemical balance of the brain should be.
Yeah, that'd be kind of hard to
out
measure.
of balance.
Yeah.
So that friggin' thing was made up by Eli Lilly back in the 70s.
Whoa.
Yeah, totally made up.
Nazi scientists, yes. Why not?
I had the paper on it somewhere.
So Jerry, I remember you saying that we had this conversation years ago. People that do take meth or cocaine, and that's what I was asking you before. Doesn't that amplify the control of the voices on the people that do the drugs?
Well, it makes them worse.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It amplifies
what was so strange about it was the prison started filling up with drug meth addicts, right? And they were just as psychotic as the people coming in who were psychotic. It was and talking with them, it looked like there was something about the meth that opened them up to these negative entities. And what they described was that they're getting high on meth. They had a good time. They were living it up, and they were feeling good. And then they started hearing voices while they were high. And then they went, well, that's just a hallucination. When they come, they're thinking when they come down, they'll go away. And they did. And that might have happened for, 15, 20, 100 times. And then one day, they didn't go away. And they were stuck with them. They were just as psychotic as any psychotic in the state hospital. Same voices, same patterns, everything. So there's something about meth that just opens people up to these things. And what was strange when I was working in the prison, the meth addicts were telling me, when I ran out of meth, the voices would tell me where to go and when to be there, and somebody with meth would just walk up to them.
Wow.
They had the meth. they would tell.
The meth method, yeah.
Yeah, so that they would help them find the drugs. Um, there was one guy, and cocaine sometimes will drive people psychotic also, but meth is the number one.
It's worse than. What about fentanyl and some of these other drugs that they're well? That's a sedative.
It's a sedative. It's a
tranquilizer.
It's a tranquilizer. It'll just kill them. You know, fentanyl.
Yeah.
They said that a grain of fentanyl the size of a grain of salt can kill somebody.
It's yeah, super toxic. Well, when I was younger, it was PCP, and that was also a tranquilizer that was not nearly as deadly or dangerous, but it was still bad. I remember back in the day, in the 70s, smoking something and said, "Oh yeah, and that's laced with PCP." I'm like, you tell me that after, I was like, so, and that's why a lot of people are dying right now, because they're lacing different drugs, illegal drugs, obviously, with fentanyl.
Yeah. So, there was it's like what I found out while working in the state hospital. So I started asking these patients, like, what are the voices telling you? And they didn't want to tell me because, first of all, they didn't trust psychs. Our job was to turn them into psychiatry, and they didn't want their medicines, up to the point where they're just drooling and walking around like zombies.
Right.
They didn't want to take those meds. The banister proved that.
Yeah.
So let's see, where was I?
Well, let's go back to that. I wanted to ask you, because you'd sent me this document with Yoda on the top of it. Is Fear is the Path to the Dark Side. Yeah, I know about that.
Oh, so the patterns.
The patterns in the voices.
Yeah. When I started talking to these people, these patterns started appearing. Now, I ran into trouble because one of them, it took me a while to get them to trust me. And second of all, I found out later that the voices were telling them not to talk to me.
Right.
About them. They didn't want anybody to know about them. They wanted to keep that secret.
Well, that's typical in warfare or crimes.
Yeah. I didn't know that at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So here I was finding out all this information bit by bit. I mean, it was like crumb by crumb. Mm-hmm. And each piece I got, I was able to feed back to other schizophrenics and go, okay, I know this much about the voices. What else can you tell me? So each piece I found, it was kind of like, okay, this guy really wants to know what's going on with these things.
Yeah.
And they would tell me more. So these patterns started appearing, and the first one was that the voices were negative.
Yeah.
That was the most common consistent trait. They were consistently negative, derogatory, insulting, abusive, and destructive.
Mm-hmm.
If they said anything positive, it was only later to come around and stab the guy in the back later.
Wow.
So, and it was, patient after patient after patient, all schizophrenics, the voices were consistently negative. They never said anything good.
Yeah.
So my question was, what is holding them on such a negative pattern? How come they're not random like all other hallucinations that are all over the place? Some are positive, some are negative, they're neutral, some are negative. I mean, they're all over the place. They're unpredictable. Why are these voices consistently negative? Anybody who works with schizophrenics can check this out for themselves. The voices don't ever say anything good. It's always bad. You're ugly. You're stupid. You're no good. You're worthless. You're a piece of crap. Nobody likes you. Your mother turned her back on you. You're just a burden on everybody. Why don't you just go ahead and kill yourself?
Wow.
That's the kind of stuff that these guys are hearing from these voices.
Right.
Or just go ahead and use that drug. Stop taking these psychiatric meds. At least take a drug that makes you feel good for a little while. Don't be taking this garbage. They don't. The voices don't like psychiatric drugs because they calm the patient down.
Right, but they like the other drugs, the amphetamine style drugs, right?
Yep, they like those. They really get off on those. So here's this pattern that appears all of a sudden. And then a second pattern appeared. They're anti-religious. So what I saw on the when I was working in the rehab center, the psychiatric rehab center, when the chaplain ran a ice cream social down on the in the auditorium and invited all the patients, the only ones that didn't go were the schizophrenics. they sat in their beds and they were staring at the ceiling, or they were watching violent shows on TV, or reading, murder mysteries or something like that. It was always negative stuff that they were.
Yeah.
I noticed that the first time. I said, that's odd. Second time I went, that's real odd. It's the same thing again. Third time I started asking them about it.
Hmm.
And they said, well, we don't believe in God. I prayed to God before and he ignored me, and there's no God, and I don't want anything to do with Jesus or God or the Bible or anything like that.
Right.
So one guy came to me and he said he repeated the 23rd Psalm when the voices were irritating him.
Yeah.
And he said that the voices reacted like worms thrown on a hot frying pan.
Wow.
So I went, well, that's interesting. What kind of hallucination would be anti-religious? So I started asking these guys, like, did you ever go to church, while you were hearing the voices? And they go, oh, yeah. So that broke out down into 3 categories. If the voices were weak and they went to church, the voices would shut up. If the voices were moderate strength and they went to church, they would kick up, they'd get louder. They'd start mocking the preacher. They'd start mocking Christ. They'd say stuff like, Jesus couldn't even save himself. What makes you think he's going to save you?
Wow.
I've heard that over and over again. I mean, that's one of their favorite lines. It's like these guys were, it seemed when you look at these 23 patterns, it's almost like they were made in some cosmic cookie cutter.
Yeah.
Because they all of them are running the same patterns.
Right.
The ones that, I questioned in Georgia, across the United States. Now I'm in Arizona, so 2,500 miles away. The voices of schizophrenics here are saying the same exact things. Distance doesn't matter to them. It's the same friggin' patterns over and over and over again. So, like I said, it's like they're made in some cosmic cookie cutter.
Yeah, and they communicate clearly to each other. Yes.
Well, only the ones that are in the person's head. They don't speak to voices in anybody else's head.
No, but I mean, there's like a demonic network of these so-called voices. They clearly communicate with each other, sort of like AI is communicating with each other behind the scenes. Not,
Well, there's levels. Okay.
Yeah. I know.
So there's levels, and then the ones that are assigned to individual people, they can communicate with each other within that person.
Yeah.
But the voices of one person don't communicate with the voices of another. They for some reason, I've never seen that, and I asked them about that.
Okay.
So it's weird. But yeah, these patterns kept running, and then one day when I was questioning one guy, he got upset. He didn't want to talk about the voices, and I said, okay, fine. He went and he told the psychiatrist that I was asking him questions about the voices. The next morning, I got called up to the psychiatrist's office on the red carpet and being ordered, you will not ask these patients about their voices. They are hallucinations. And what you're doing by questioning them about their voices, you're reinforcing the voices, you're reinforcing the hallucinations, and you're making them worse.
Oh, yeah, right.
And yeah, I knew it was bullcrap at the time with what I know already by that time. But you can't speak back to these guys. They're so arrogant that it's incredible how arrogant they are.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, they do have the authority in a court of law, at least they used to incarcerate people. They still do?
They still do. They can get you and they can hold you. And they have a lot to say. They're given that authority, even though they don't know crap. They know about the patterns. They can determine whether the guy is dangerous or not from the patterns, but they don't know anything about the voices. So, as I learned more and more about the voices, I was able to diagnose these guys as to whether they were a threat or not, based on the strength of the voices and the patterns they were running.
Yeah.
So that came in real handy when I was working in the emergency rooms, determining whether they should be hospitalized or not. And that's where the snap of the rubber band came in when I went to the prison. So I had to go into first gear while I was in the psychiatric hospital because I knew the psychiatrist, and I ran into enough trouble with another one. So they're all thinking the same way. Yeah. And I think part of that was because they were being assaulted by schizophrenics.
Oh,
so they
were
afraid of them. They were afraid to ask them or pressure them a little bit to try to find out anything. And they weren't looking for anything anyway. They thought they had the answers.
Yeah.
Well, the voices are schizophrenic, it's a biochemical brain imbalance. And, that's what it is. But this biochemical brain imbalance it's a freaking lie.
Yeah.
It's like here's one of the top psychiatrists, Ronald W. Pies, MD, professor of psychiatry, says, "I don't believe I've ever heard of a knowledgeable, well-trained psychiatrist make such a preposterous claim that the patients have a chemical brain imbalance, except to perhaps mock it. In truth, the chemical brain imbalance was a notion that was always kind of an urban legend, never taken seriously by well-informed psychiatrists." So what happened is in the 60s when Eli Lilly came out with Prozac, they needed some explanation as to why their drug worked.
Yeah.
Why their drug worked with mental illnesses at all. So they found out that the schizophrenics, their serotonin, and their neurotransmitter wasn't as active as it should be.
Yeah, allegedly.
Because they're depressed, right? So the nerves aren't firing the way they should. So they came up with a serotonin reuptake blocker. So the nerves don't destroy the serotonin after it's used. So there's more serotonin in there. And they were thinking, okay, well, this will work to help help them become not depressed. Those friggin' antidepressants are just a hair above, what do they call it? Where you believe you're taking a pill.
Oh yeah,
give you
placebo.
A pill. Placebo. They just work slightly above the effect of a placebo.
Wow.
They're not very effective at all. But these guys are making a fortune selling them.
Okay? Yeah, right.
So here they didn't have a reason as to why they worked. And they didn't know why antipsychotics worked either. Antipsychotics were discovered in a dye lab in Germany when the people working in the dye lab were getting all gorked out, and they didn't know why. It was something in the dyes. So a French chemist, I forgot what the name of it, but it's a big pharmaceutical company in France right now.
Yeah.
They came and they extracted this phenothiazine from the dye, and then they tested it on different creatures and saw that it cranked them down. I mean, it tranquilized them. So they wanted to try it on hospitals in Europe, but the Freudians had control at that time, and they wouldn't let them give it to them. So they came over to the United States with these phenothiazines, and they gave it to a mental hospital population, and they all became, sedate. They're all walking around like.
I wonder what would happen if they give them methylene blue. I don't know if you've had any of that, but I've been taking it. It's
what does it do? I've heard of it.
It's a dye. Look, there's a lot of claims about it, and anybody who's watching this show, if you're on SSRIs, do not take methylene blue. Talk to your doctor first. And but it supposedly cleans out the mitochondria. I can tell you this much: I breathe better. I don't take it every day. I do it like every other day, sometimes not at all for a while. But the bottom line is, it gives you this mental clarity. And I don't even know how that's happening, because it's not like caffeine or anything like that. It's not a stimulant, but I noticed that I have more endurance when I do workouts, and just the mental clarity is no joke. I mean, it's hard to describe, but it is also naturally, if you can think straight and you have a little more oxygen in your system, you're going to feel better. So it is a bit of a mood enhancer, but it's not a drug per se. But it is a dye. And I think it's sulfur based. So I've learned a lot about sulfur based things, like recently DMSO, which is derivative of wood pulp. And it's heavily, the main component in there is sulfur. So there's something about these chemical interactions, because our bodies are electrochemical. When we're healthy, obviously we're not depressed, right? That's just obvious.
Now they sell this stuff over the counter.
What, methylene blue?
Yeah.
Yeah, they do now. I'll send you a link later. But apparently it's not all made this at the same quality. There's a company here in Florida that's making it. It's very high quality. And it's not like, again, I would talk to you, if you're taking medications already, make sure it's not contraindicated. Contraindicated, is that how you say it? So there's no cross side effects that actually are harmful. But again, it's not a drug. Methylene blue, it's just a dye that originally that they discovered, and is now being, a lot of people are promoting it on these different talk shows. I'm not promoting it, folks. I'm just telling you, I took it, and I noticed that Jerry, I would definitely just try it to see what you think, as long as you're not taking SSRIs, and I don't think you would be. So let me ask you about this further, about this paper that you sent me, patterns the
Right.
voices run. Is this published somewhere?
Only on my website.
Oh, I see. Okay, so if there's a link on your website to this paper, I should include it on with this interview?
You can if you want to. It would be on my website under articles.
Okay. All right.
I think I sent you a copy, right?
Yeah. I'm just concerned for people. This is how I do it. I always give people, when this is my Substack, just like the previous, what I had before with the website and all the shows, I always give people probably too much information after a show, links to books and articles, videos, whatever, because if they want to do more research, I think that's a good thing.
Oh, see, that list is an operational definition of the voices.
Okay.
So the voices are energetic. They're not physical. And here's psychiatry and big pharma and the medical system. They're thinking that mental illness is a physical illness. It's not.
Yeah, but the mind isn't physical either, Jerry. You know that.
It's not. So these voices, they can go into the schizophrenic's mind. They can pull up every rotten thing they've ever done, bring it back out, and torment them with it.
Right.
Yes, they can. And another thing that's interesting too is it works both ways.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're talking about energy and frequency here.
Yeah.
These voices are a very low frequency. Okay?
Uh-huh.
They want to keep the patient at a very low frequency. They want to keep them upset. They want to keep them paranoid.
Right.
And one of the things I saw also was that not only did they foster negative emotion by telling them all this upset stuff, they're consummate liars. They don't care what they tell these people. It's what they can get them to believe.
Right.
If they can get them to believe the crap they're telling them, that very much upsets them, and then they feed off of that.
Yeah.
That energy.
Yeah.
So if you're working with schizophrenics, you ask them, after the voices come, and I did a test on this too. I mean, when I saw that and this was in the prison. Well, I noticed it first in the psych hospital, but in the prison I was able to start testing it, because I had to be careful in the psych hospitals that a psychiatrist didn't catch me asking questions about what schizophrenia actually was.
Right.
You're not even allowed to ask questions about it.
Yeah, how dare you?
Yeah, how dare you? How dare you challenge us or even think about challenging us? It's incredible. So what I found was that some of the prisoners, when I got to the prison, I had a group of prisoners who were willing to talk to me in real time about what their voices were telling me.
Wow.
Okay? So that's where these patterns came from.
Uh-huh.
Okay. So I was able to talk to the voices through them, and they would give answers. The voices didn't like them coming to see me.
Right.
And I would give them homework, and I would constantly question them about what the voices were saying and how they operated, and whatever I could find out about them. And these patterns started appearing. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
They were negative. They were anti-religious. They foster and create negative emotion. They consistently work toward the creation of prolonged negative emotional states in their victims, including anger, anxiety, paranoia, guilt, shame, whatever negative emotion they can drum up.
Right.
That's what they feed off of.
Yes.
So these are very low vibrational entities. And here's psychiatry and the big pharma and the medical schools, all the universities, thinking that this is some kind of physical something. It's not. This is a spiritual battle. Yeah. And they're energetically draining their victims. Right.
Right.
I've had one prisoner said he was drained one night so bad he couldn't even get up to go to breakfast. You know.
Right.
And so I started asking the prisoners. They were all reporting. Almost all of them were reporting that after the voices attacked them, they didn't have any energy.
Yeah, well, that
So,
happened to me when after I first met you, and I said, "Sure, I'll help you with your book." Yeah, they're like, "You think so, huh?"
yeah, I
Yeah,
remember
well,
that.
yeah, and then they're like, "Well, okay, then you're not going to get any sleep. We're gonna torment you," and they did. I mean, ways that I didn't even know was possible. The electricity in
Yeah.
my teeth, in my throat, in my brain, like lights going off in my head at night. That was crazy. So,
Well, I had them come when I was working with a patient over the internet. Okay,
mhm,
they came
mhm.
through the freaking screen. I could feel them right
You
through the
could?
screen. Yes, I was like,
Wow.
I haven't felt this since I was in the ER.
Wow.
There was one time I was on my roof meditating, and boom, they were there. I can't see them, I can't hear them, but I can feel them.
Right, right,
You
right,
know?
right.
So I developed that while I was working. The last 10 years I worked for somebody else was in the emergency room. All the major emergency rooms around Tucson.
Mhm.
You know, so I can. The feeling is there's no other feeling like it. It's like this icky electrical feeling.
Yeah.
You know, it got to where I could feel them so acutely that people being brought into the ER who were psychotic and trying to hide it. I would ask them, "You hearing voices?" And they said, "No, I'm not hearing voices." And I would tell them, "Yes, you are, and this is how strong they are." And they'd go, "How did you know that?"
Wow.
I mean, it was like, it was ridiculous. So these,
I think that's why in the Bible they call them unclean spirits because they really are dark and dirty
oh,
and
they are,
very negative.
they're awful. They're just awful. So these patterns went on and on and on. They foster and create negative energy. They energetically drain their victims.
Right.
Okay, but the victim doesn't realize that because they're feeling so bad all the time anyway.
Yeah.
That they don't notice that they're being drained, and the ones that are being drained constantly.
Yeah.
So they're hearing the voices all the time. They're being drained constantly.
Wow.
They feel bad all the time. But the ones where it was most noticeable is where the voices attacked, drained them, and then disappeared for a while, and then would come back later when they needed their fix.
Whoa.
So I would ask those guys. I'd go. I did another questionnaire.
Yeah.
1 to 10. I go. How much energy do you have before the voices come, and how much energy do you have after the voices come?
Mhm.
And it was 1 to 10. It was subjective, and it was consistently less energy after the voices came. And I think at that
Sure.
time we ran an analysis of variance on it, and it was statistically significant.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
the patients didn't realize that because they were feeling so bad all the time anyway.
Sure.
That this was just another bad thing that appeared. It was just
Yeah.
part
You
of the
can't
mess.
you can't think straight. I mean,
You
I
can't think.
know.
Yes.
You don't really think straight when when they're doing that to you
Yeah,
after a while.
so I'd ask them. I said, uh, "Okay, after the voices come, you feel drained. Were you doing anything to um, expend that amount of energy?" "No." So, "Well, what were you doing?" "Well, I was laying in bed all night. I was tossing and turning."
Yeah.
And how'd you feel? They said, "Well, I felt like I was working with a pickaxe out in the hot sun all day."
Oh my.
It's actual words of one client.
Yeah.
But the pattern was the same thing. After the voices attacked, they were energetically drained. They
Yeah.
couldn't get out of bed. They couldn't function. They didn't feel good. They had no energy.
So I don't know if we ever discussed this before, but I told you about my experience, the first one that really was transformational for me with that young boy who was bleeding to death. And I saw those parasites manifest in the room. I think they were there all the time. We normally don't see them, like you said, but something about the trauma of that moment, the adrenaline, whatever it was, I was able to see them briefly, kind of hovering, and they were spherical and dark. I'm not saying that's all that I'm not saying all unclean spirits look like that, but my impression now, after so many years of retrospective analysis, is that those things are like what we see honeybees. They go and collect the pollen and take it back to the hive. I believe those particular parasites, unclean, whatever they are, spiritual parasites, they collect negative energy that's emitted by DNA human DNA when we harm ourselves or others or both, and they collect that dark energy, that dissonant energy, and they take it somewhere else. That's
Well,
just it's just an insight. I could be wrong.
well, no, I think you're partly right there because I remember I was talking to one. I'd spend hours with these guys. I mean,
Yeah.
the rest of the psych staff, they couldn't stand them for 20 minutes. They didn't
Yeah.
know what was going on with them. They had no idea what the voices were. They just, are you suicidal? You're homicidal? No, okay, get out of here.
Yeah.
I'm picking their heads sometimes for hours,
Yeah.
talking to them. And what I found is one guy who was, he was getting better. And we got rid of, he had two voices that were plaguing him. We got rid of those two. And then that's the only two that he had been telling me about for months.
Yeah.
And finally, we got rid of those two. And he was clean. He no more psychosis. And then all of a sudden, right after we got rid of the last one, and both of us thought that was all he had. A third one appeared, and he said another one just appeared. And I said, "Well, who's that one? Where'd he come from?" He said that was their boss.
Oh no.
So they have, what do you call it?
A hierarchy.
Hierarchy.
You know who told me this recently is my pastor, who
Did he?
does deliverance ministry. Yes, he told me exactly what you just said.
They have a hierarchy, and this
Yes.
guy was pissed that we
Yeah.
had gotten rid of.
Yes.
his two workers.
That's also what my pastor told me.
And
They punish the lower ones if they
Yes.
don't perform.
They tell the lower ones that they have no light in them, and if they don't do what they're told, they will cease to exist.
Whoa.
That's what they tell them.
Okay.
So they're terrified. They have no, and they're told that the light will kill them or hurt them.
Wow.
So they don't want anything to do with the light.
The light, meaning God.
Meaning God.
Wow.
So there was a period of time where I would actually speak to them, and there was one fella who, I think it was William Baldwin, came up with this method where he would talk to them and walk them into the light, and then ask for a relative, a dead relative, or somebody they trust to come and pick them up. Okay? And once that person showed up and took them, that voice was gone.
Well, that's how it works in deliverance ministry. If you've never tried it or done, anything. Okay,
never tried it. Don't know anything about it.
Okay, so neither did I, but I found myself doing that this March of this year, 2025. And so that's what happens after you go through an inventory of all the trauma and you release that and all the curses that you've brought upon yourself through all the sinful behavior that we most of us engage in, whether you know it or not, and generational curses, all that stuff. But anyways, the pastor, the deliverance minister, is a facilitator. He's not doing this. God's working through him. But when it comes to actually binding and removing and then imprisoning these entities, that's all done by holy angels that are what do you call it? They intercede. But again, it's a very personal process, but it's also it's standard. It's standardized. It's not like people can. I know a lot of people try to come up with their own protocol, but it's actually very well established in the Bible in the New Testament. And it was Jesus was the first exorcist. Catholics have gone off into the weeds doing their own thing. Not against, like, if you're Catholic, sorry if you find that offensive, but my understanding of this, and it's very deep. I had a crash course in it, and I'm still studying it now after I had that 5 days of intense salvation, baptism, deliverance, and thank God I'm clear. Okay, I am clear, but I still then have to maintain myself because those things are all around us all the time. And they're always looking for a way to get in, kind of like thieves. Yes. They want to break into your house and steal your stuff. Well, our souls are apparently very valuable to the satanic forces for whatever reason. We're not going to go into that, but they obviously they need to, like you said, they're literally ordered to manipulate us to cause harm to ourselves and or others.
And the part I forgot to tell you is that they have to turn over a good portion of the energy they take to the higher ups.
Oh, how did you find that out?
One of them told me.
Okay, so I wasn't wrong. I mean,
No,
I'm not saying it's perfect what I said, but there's
it
a
was
lot of
close.
insights. Yeah, there's a
Yeah.
lot of insights that have come over the years because it's one of those things, Jerry, as you know, once you start delving into this, it's not a curiosity, it becomes your way of life
Yeah, you and
or
I are
survival.
you and I are searchers. Okay,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
you're searching one direction. What I ran into was something. I was looking for something that friggin' worked.
yeah, of
Because
course.
psychotherapy didn't work. I tried.
Yeah,
Like I said, you try to talk to a schizophrenic, try to counsel a schizophrenic. It's like trying to shoot a rhino in the butt with a BB rifle. It just
yeah,
doesn't work.
yes,
So I'm
yes,
looking for something that frickin' worked, and I ran into. This was weird how it happened because I think it was all divinely brought down. All of a
sure.
sudden, I get email all the time from all kinds of people. And it's just there's kind of a strange pattern to it.
Yes, I know the
So
feeling.
so all of a sudden, one guy comes in and he goes, "I got somebody you need to meet." And he said, at worst, she would be a jolly old lady, and I think you'd like talking to her. And he left it at that. And I wonder what that's all about. And I'm like, should I even respond to this? And then the curiosity got me. And go, well, a jolly old lady. That's not. That's not. That's way out of kilter for what I usually get.
Yeah.
So I wrote him back and I said, all right, let's meet your jolly old lady. What's going on here? It turns out that she was the chief trainer for a energetic psychotherapy that I had never heard of, okay,
Hmm.
prior. And it was I found out about it shortly before I met her, but I didn't know about this guy who wrote me. So I was trying it out based on the books I read, and it was working. I mean, it was
Okay.
actually getting rid of trauma, the emotional charge with trauma. Getting
Yeah,
rid of it.
that dissonant energy kind of
Right.
sticks to you.
It's a negative energy, and
Yeah.
it was actually getting rid of it. But it had a spiritual component that no other psychotherapy had. And without that spiritual component, it wouldn't work.
What can you
So,
describe that?
yeah, so this stuff it's called the Mace Energy Method. The guy who came up with it, he was a genius. He
Mm,
wasn't a psychologist or a social worker or anything to do with social services. This guy was a ship captain. He drove
really?
these big freighters back and forth across the ocean. He was interested in how the mind worked his whole life. And he was
Okay.
always reading philosophy and psychology and psychiatry and all this stuff, trying to figure out how does the mind work. You
Right.
know? And he came to the conclusion that the mind doesn't do all the thinking and reasoning and all the kind of stuff that's attributed to it.
Right.
All it does is take pictures of where you put your attention. The
Hmm.
spirit does everything else.
True.
The spirit does the reasoning, the talking, the
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
all everything else that's attributed to the mind. So what he found is that energy moves from negative to positive. Okay,
Hmm.
so he's also was studying trauma, and he found that what happened with trauma was that you get a horrible feeling. Nobody survives trauma on this planet. This is a real hard planet to live on.
No
Nobody
kidding.
gets away without being traumatized at some time, at some point, and badly.
Yeah.
So he found that most psychological illnesses come from trauma.
Sure.
Right? And if you look into the background of schizophrenics, I mean, it's just ripe with trauma of all
Of
different
course.
kinds:
Of
physical,
course.
sexual, mental abuse,
Yeah. Or
trauma.
all of that. Yeah.
Yeah. So what he found was that what happens when you're traumatized, you get a really bad feeling, and then you make a decision about what part you played in that trauma.
Hmm.
Right? And that decision is never a good one because you don't make good decisions when you're in a traumatic state.
Right.
Okay, so here you are with a decision that seemed functional at the time, but wasn't really because it was made while you were in a traumatic state, and you're stuck with this bad feeling that just stays there forever. So that's non-functional. It interferes with your survival. When you're feeling bad, you're depressed, and you're traumatized. It doesn't work real well. So your
Right.
ego shows up and says, "Okay, let me handle this." It takes it and it throws it into your subconscious mind, out of your conscious reach, and locks it down. So it's trapped there, can't get out, with all the negative energy that's involved with it.
Okay.
Now that stuff isn't dead; it's alive. So the way it functions is that when anybody in your psychic sphere shows up that is similar to the person that caused that trauma, they call it a negative identity that's trapped there in your subconscious mind. That thing triggers, and it orders you to either attack that person or run from them or to avoid them. And every time it triggers, that negative identity gets stronger and stronger and stronger until it starts taking over the person, and the person isn't even aware of it. Right? So it's like the person you hate just keeps showing up, or no matter where you go.
Yeah.
That and what the ego is telling you, it's them out there. It's that guy out there. You can see him. He's the one causing the problems.
Right.
No, it's this negative identity that's trapped in your subconscious. It's like a landmine.
Right.
It goes off when one of these guys show up. It tears up all kinds of relationships. It causes problems with bosses. It causes problems, interpersonal problems all over the place.
Right.
What we call a negative identity. The person isn't aware it's there, but it's active, and it's controlling what they say, what they don't say, what they do, what they don't do, how they feel, their attitude. It's controlling all that stuff, so they're not even aware of it. Okay? The other thing that it does is when you get into a jam and you've been into trouble with this particular thing before, and you swear to yourself, I'm never going to get in that trouble again. That's never going to happen to me again. 6 months later, you're right back there again. You go, how in the hell did I get back here? How did that happen?
Yeah.
And I remember it happened to me, and I'm going, well, it's got to be a series of decisions that got me back here that I wasn't aware of. That's exactly what it is. So it's that negative identity there. So there's two kinds of identities. There's positive identity, there's negative identities. So you got a positive identity as a podcaster. You got a positive identity as a car driver. Remember when you first started driving a car and you're like real nervous and you're paying attention to everything and you're afraid to take your attention off it. Now you get in the car and you're thinking about something else and the car virtually drives itself. So your car driver identity takes over, and it's driving the car until something happens where it requires your full attention, and then you come back to driving the car again. But otherwise, it's like subconscious. Well, that's the same thing with these negative identities. They're like mind viruses. They're very similar to a computer virus operating in the background, but you're not aware of it. And they're messing up your life. Okay.
Yeah.
But they are energy. Okay. So this is a energetic psychotherapy. So your thoughts are energy, and your mind is energy, your feelings are energy, your spirit is energy. You're an energetic being.
Right.
If that energy left you, you'd be a corpse.
Right.
So here's psychiatry going, oh, we got the answer to everything. It's these drugs. Pour them on your brain. You'll feel better. No. They have no cure for anything. Psychiatry has no cure for any mental illness. They have no test for any mental illness.
Well, since you're being so candid, Jerry, I'm assuming that you're not working in that industry anymore.
Oh, I am. I picked it up 3 years ago, and it's working better than anything I've ever seen. So basically what it does is, if you get a car battery, it's a brand new car battery, you charge it up full and then you drain it down to nothing, so no electricity in it.
Yeah.
Dead, and it stays dead. You can't recharge it again.
Yeah.
So what the Mace Energy method does is it goes in there, it finds where that negative identity is buried, it identifies it and the components of it, and then it turns it into a picture, okay, and attaches that negative energy to that picture.
Okay.
And then it sets up a structure between that picture and your spirit. Since negative energy flows to positive energy, it sets up a psychological structure where that energy flows from that negative identity to the spirit, and the spirit transmutes it into positive energy. It doesn't destroy it, it changes it.
Yeah. I understand.
So that negative charge from the trauma vanishes inside of an hour. It's gone. So here's people that I've worked with that are 75, 80 years old, that something happened to them when they were 4 or 5 years old, something bad, and they determined that they're worthless. They're not a good person.
Jerry,
and they go through their entire life believing that they're not a good person.
Well, yes, I know how that feels. So what I meant was, you're not working in a clinical setting with Like before when I first met you, and I had that, and you were still working in the mental health industry, but now you're helping people independently.
Right, because I found this works better than anything I've ever seen in my career.
Oh, that's awesome. I got to read up on it.
Well, John Mace wrote 2 books on it. It's called Energy Over Mind,
okay,
and Causism, because it gets to the cause of the mental illness.
And how do you spell his last name?
Mace, M-A-C-E.
That's it?
John Mace.
John Mace. Yeah. Okay, I'll look
for
that.
So within an hour, these major traumas are drained. So you ask them, okay, how do you feel? Imagine you're back in that trauma state again. How do you feel about it now? And they go, it's nothing. I can remember it, but there's no charge to it.
Wow.
And it happens in an hour. That's how fast it is.
That's crazy. I mean, that's wonderful. It makes sense to me.
It's almost magic. It's freaking magic.
It sounds divinely inspired, a gift.
Well, it is. Like I said, without that spiritual component, it doesn't work at all.
Right. Because that's where it's coming from. Yes, yes.
So you're actually funneling that negative energy to the spirit to reabsorb it.
Okay.
And then it's gone. So they will remember the trauma, but there's no emotional charge to it at
Connecting them, yeah.
Yeah. Now, what I found with schizophrenics, it's a little bit harder. So what it does is it gets rid of that subconscious garbage. With schizophrenics who the voices are very mild, it will get rid of the voices. If the voices are medium strength, it'll sometimes get rid of them, sometimes won't, but it does get rid of the trauma that they feed off of.
Okay.
And then with people that are very psychotic, the voices show up and they go, don't listen to this guy, he's crazy. Don't follow his directions. So a lot of times you can't work with them, but it is working for schizophrenics. And if it doesn't get rid of the voices, it gets rid of a lot of the trauma that they experience. So the voices become less strong, they come less frequently. And if we keep working with it, we can actually get rid of some of them. Right? I've never seen anything work as well as this.
That's awesome.
Especially for like OCD people, people that are traumatized, PTSD.
Yeah.
I mean, so the people who came up with this, they took it to. It was John Mace he lived in Australia. They took it to the University of Australia. They demonstrated to them how well it worked. They said, "Well, we'll take it if you turn over the patent to us." Mace went,
patent?
I'm not putting over, and I'm not putting the, they have a patent on, so you got to sign all kinds of papers and stuff when you become a therapist. Then they took it to the Australian legislature, showed them how well it worked, and they just blew it off.
Wow.
So the psychiatric mafia doesn't want this getting out because it works.
Yeah, it's like American Cancer Society. It's too big an industry for them to actually start to help people to live a healthy lifestyle and boost their immune system. Instead, they've been mandating that people erase their immune system and end up with myocarditis and turbo cancers and all that garbage.
They don't make money by fixing people. They make money by treating symptoms, and that's all psychiatry does. They're treating symptoms.
Yes.
They're not curing anything. They don't want to cure, and the big pharma doesn't want to cure either. They're making billions of dollars with this scheme that they have now, that they're actually poisoning people.
I call it the medical mafia.
Yeah,
I mean,
the psychiatric mafia.
Yeah, but it's just another branch of the same tree, right?
These guys are such consummate liars.
Yeah.
They have the entire Western world believing that there's a biochemical imbalance causing all mental illness. Complete lie.
Yeah.
And here's a paragraph written about it. It said it was not until the late 1980s, after the release of the landmark antidepressant, that the idea, or antidepressant Prozac, that the idea of a chemical imbalance came into the psychiatric mainstream. As psychiatrist Peter Brigham in 1991 points out in his book Toxic Psychiatry, the drug company Eli Lilly advanced the chemical imbalance theory as a marketing scheme to sell their new drug Prozac. There was, of course, no demonstrable evidence showing that the depressed patients had any kind of chemical imbalance in their brain. Lilly knew it at the time and ran with it anyway. Before long, psychiatrists and psychiatric patients alike came to identify with the idea that mental disorders were caused by a chemical imbalance of the brain, and they're still advertising that today. I went and looked this morning. They're still advertising depression and schizophrenia as a chemical imbalance of the brain. It was disproved decades ago. Totally disproved. They're still pushing it.
Wow.
So they want it somewhere where people can't see it themselves. Okay. These patterns that I have there that you can get from my website, anybody working with schizophrenics can see these patterns for themselves.
Right.
The bottom line is, if schizophrenic voices are running patterns, they can't be hallucinations, which are random.
Right, because it's a sign of intelligence to be able to structure things like that.
Like pattern, you know. So
yeah, they're following a plan.
Yep, they energetically train their victim. They get louder after sunset. They get louder when ignored. They foster self-destructive behavior. They foster isolation. They demand the attention of their victims. They maneuver for increased control over the victim all the time. So it's a constant push to control the victim more. So they can control the victim to increase their amount of loosh that they're producing. They gaslight. They lie. There was one guy who was psychotic, who was on heavy doses of meds. The voices told him that he had murdered somebody, but he was so confused he didn't know whether he did or not.
Yeah.
You know, so every time he heard cop cars, the voices would tell him, "Hey, the cops are coming for him." If he heard a fire siren or cop siren or something, the voice would say, "They're coming for you. There they are. They're looking for you." So he was afraid to go tell the cops and said, "Hey, I think I murdered somebody," because he was afraid they'd throw him in the mental hospital.
Well, of course.
And then, on the other hand, if he didn't tell them, then every time he heard a siren, it would be like they're coming for you. You know, you better go run and hide. So it was like a catch-22. They had this guy in. You know,
wow.
Perfect.
So what happened? Did he tell the police, or what happened?
No, he just took his meds and shut up.
Oh, okay. Well, I had that recurring dream more than once when I was a child, and I felt so guilty that I had murdered another child and buried him out in the field.
Yeah,
and
that's what they do. That's what they do.
It made no sense to me because I had no memory of it other than the dream.
Mm-hmm.
And I certainly couldn't comprehend why I would even have done that, because I didn't even know who it was. Anyway, obviously I didn't do that. But I remember when I got in trouble, one of the times I got in trouble, and I'm losing my voice. One of the times that I got in trouble with the law, and I was still a minor, my dad said to me, "Well, at least you didn't kill anybody." And I'm thinking, what? Did yeah, as far as you know, I mean, it's like, as far and so, I mean, I really had to stop and think about what he just said, or why he just said that, because to me, if as a dad now, I would never say that to my kid, like, well, at least you didn't do that, because no. And so anyway, I totally get where you're coming from.
Yeah, they hit in dreams.
Well, yeah, I know, because I remember when I first met you and how badly they were attacking me. Fortunately, I survived it, you survived it, or we're here now, and clearly they're still here too.
Yeah, you're speaking out like I've never seen you before. I mean, last time they were beating the crap out of you.
Well, yeah, I mean, right, and that's why I had to withdraw, at least from working directly with you. Indirectly, I have been supporting your work and telling other people about it. I think that's how you met Sherry and other people, which is great. We're supposed to be helping each other, but ultimately, I think we're supposed to ask for divine intervention, and that's a component that I wasn't ready to integrate.
Yeah, I think that's the bottom line. Now, with Mace, it gets rid of the negative identity. Okay, so this is a body of negative energy. It's not a spirit.
Yeah.
It's not thinking. It's not aware that it's with the person. It's like a computer virus.
Right.
It has no awareness that it's in the computer.
Right.
I would say 75% of what psychiatry does could be taken over by Mace with a positive, permanent resolution.
Okay.
You know.
Well, I'm going to look for his books and see if I can find a link. I'll put them in the Substack page.
Well, what we can do later on sometime is I'll run a May session for you, so you can actually experience it for yourself.
Oh, okay. You mean like record it or just personally do
No,
that?
just personally do that.
Okay. Yeah, because that might get a little bit ugly.
No, it doesn't. Matter of fact, what's so interesting about this is since it's energetic, I
Yeah.
do not need to know what that trauma is.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And, you know,
Interesting.
the only thing I'll need to know is how you felt about it
Okay.
and where it happened. That's
Got it.
I don't need to know anything about who did it, what happened, any of the circumstances surrounding it. So that's great for people who were, you know, sexually abused. They don't want to talk about that over and
Of
over
course
and over
not.
again.
No.
You know? So as
It's
long
very
as they
embarrassing.
know what it is, and there's a number of times where I'd finish up with somebody, they're feeling great, there's a big release, they can feel lighter, they feel more energy, and
Yeah.
I have no idea what happened to them. I don't need to know. It works anyway.
Right. As long as they know
As long
what
as they know.
they're
So they-
processing, yes,
They have to hold it in mind. They have to process it.
and then release it. Yeah,
Yeah, I
I
can walk them
understand.
through how to process it,
Yeah.
how to set up those structures that they need to do to get rid of it, but they have to do the processing.
Yeah. Wow. So we're coming up almost on 2 hours here, and I told you I'm just starting off with this software. Hopefully, this file's not so big I can't upload it. So I think we're gonna have to wrap it up here, but I do appreciate your time and your talent and your dedication, Jerry, over all the years that I've known you. And obviously even before that, you were working on this problem. And I'm so glad that you're getting some results now.
Well,
Better than a rubber band.
The rubber band would just temporarily shut them up so I
Yeah,
could
that
answer
was
some
so
questions.
clever. You got to admit though, that was clever. And also what was it, Psalm 23? I think you
Oh,
told me.
they hate Psalm
that.
23. They hate the 23rd Psalm.
23rd
I've
Psalm.
had patients tell me that when they repeat the 23rd Psalm, the voices react like worms thrown on a hot frying pan.
Yeah.
What does that tell you? You know, what does that tell you when they go to church and the voices kick up? They're
Yes.
anti-religious. What kind of hallucination would be anti-religious?
Yeah, right. I totally get it. Well, we'll have to continue this conversation again. I'm sorry it's been so many years, but I appreciate you keeping in touch with me behind the scenes.
Well, I appreciate you. You were the first one who realized what was going on. You're the one that got me started, even before I was ready to speak out, because I was still working for somebody else at that time.
Right.
So I was a little paranoid. Well, if this gets out, I'm going to have trouble on the job. You know? So that's when you came up with Dr. J.
Yeah.
And then from then on, I must have told 1,000 people, well, I'm not a doctor. And then finally, I just gave up. I said, okay, it's an honorary title. I'm not going to keep correcting people for the rest of my life.
No, it's just a pseudonym. But anyway, it doesn't. I was just trying to protect you, and
no, I appreciate it. You realized how much trouble that would have caused me, and you did keep it. You know,
I tried.
I
tried. I tried.
But now I don't care because I'm not working for any of those.
I understand.
Bozos anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they're not even aware of energetic psychotherapy. They have no idea. It's like a Martian spaceship lands on their front lawn. I mean, it works. They have no idea what it is or why it works or how it works or that it even exists, and they don't want it out.
Yeah.
Because it will upset their system.
Well,
something that actually works and gets rid of mental problems. They don't want that out.
I feel the same way, Jerry, about cancer, that it's like an assembly line, and they're mindless or like automatons working in this industry. And as long as they keep getting a paycheck and the protocols are just like, well, we have our weekly meetings where all the oncologists get together and validate each other's little, positions. And it's just like, oh, really, you guys? Is there anything else we can do? Oh, no, trust us. It's like car salesmen. It's like unbelievable.
I've heard over and over again that they've had a cure for cancer for years, but they won't let it out.
Yeah. I think there's multiple ways to attack it, but the bottom line is if they would just tell honestly, if everybody knew what the cause was, the root cause, then they would stop doing that, encouraging, amplifying that, whatever the cause is. And it seems to be one of the most recent literature I read is it's electrical in the cell causes it to go from, I'll just give it to you this way since we're talking. when the body needs a new cell for whatever organ or part of it, it creates a stem cell. That's what scientists call it, a stem cell. And it's like a Lego piece. It basically could fit anywhere, but it has a certain thing. And then when it goes from a stem cell to being, let's say, a heart cell, it's called differentiated because now it's different. It's no longer a stem cell. It's now a heart cell. So it's different. But when it becomes cancerous, it's called de-differentiated. So now it's no longer a stem cell. It's not a heart cell. It's a de-differentiated rebellious cell that doesn't support the bodily function. So they say there's all these different tumors. No, there isn't. There's only one kind of cancer, and it's parasitic. The whole thing. I'm not saying it's totally It's not. Parasites are a component. That's proven. But the cells, literally, our cells are somehow flipped, and they believe it's electrical, which you know about, that causes the cell to flip to become this de-differentiated, like an insurrectionist.
It's like Obama the renegade.
Let's not get political. Even though, yes, I'm very grateful to be here in America.
Well,
To
so
tell you
am
the
I.
truth, compared to where I mean,
yeah.
I've been to 59 countries, Jerry, and
I know you
this
have
is
to. Every time I contacted you, we're somewhere else.
yeah. Well, I'm here now. I'm actually in Florida. I was in California, and before that, whatever. It doesn't matter. The bottom line is, it's really not where you live; it's how you live. But you don't want to live in like Somalia or something if you don't have to, or South
I've
Africa.
never seen. I've traveled a lot too, and there's no place like the U.S.
Yeah, it is quite extraordinary. We're blessed, and hopefully we take it. Not just take advantage of it, but honor the fact that God gave us a chance to actually be free on a prison planet. And again, it goes back to the war in heaven. I don't want to get into that discussion with you right now, but I've learned a lot about that as well. So we're all basically casualties in that regard. And ultimately, the reason I keep bringing it up is because I think that's where these unclean demonic spirits are coming from. They're leftovers from that the conflict that's still raging. Yeah, well, yes, and others, but yes, basically the Nephilim who lost their physical bodies still have a spirit that's imprisoned here on this planet.
Yeah, so people need to understand that it's not just schizophrenics that hear these voices.
Right.
We all do.
Yes.
They come barging in there with this obsessive, intrusive thought that didn't come from you.
Right.
It's like well, you're driving a car and you go, I wonder what it'd be like to turn into oncoming traffic, or you're standing on the edge of a bridge and you go, I wonder what it would like to jump.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they're hitting us all the time.
I know.
And even those thoughts that are upsetting, they get a little bit of loosh out of those.
Well, my understanding is that's why we need to pray for protection, not only for ourselves, but for others every day, because it only lasts for 24 hours. And I still not sure why that is, but so it may seem a little bit monotonous or repetitive, but that's what I've been doing ever since I went through this crash course and came out intact, actually more intact than I've ever been in my life. So I mean, it's a blessing and I'm grateful, but I also know there's a responsibility that comes with that. And that's why I've really changed my life entirely after the fact to honor God and to live up to his standards as opposed to, the world that we're living in.
And that's where it needs to go, because with schizophrenia, even if you get rid of the voices, just like it says in the Bible, if you don't fill that empty vacant space with something good, they will come back with their minions. And I've seen that happen over and over and over again.
Usually people stronger. Yes.
Yeah, usually stronger. Because people think it's like having a infection.
Yeah.
You take antibiotics, the infection's gone, and you go, okay, it's not like that. It's not like that. You have to maintain. If you get rid of those things, you have to fill those rooms with a positive spiritual practice of some kind. Otherwise, they'll come back with, like you said, stronger and more of them. And I've seen that happen over and over again, where they go, oh, they're gone now. I'm free. No, you're not. You better do the maintenance, or you're going to be in trouble.
Yeah. So my pastor said recently, you're either filled with the Holy Spirit or you're filled with unholy spirits. And I'm like, okay, that makes way too much sense what you just said right there. It's, it sounds so simple, but man, that's really profound. So obviously I want to be filled with the Holy Spirit. And I I am now. Before I wasn't. It was just kind of touching me and giving me guidance, because look, God wants all of us. We're all basically the prodigal son. Those who haven't already accepted Him and come back home into His kingdom, those people are still prodigal sons. But he wants us to all come home. And so that's why, you and I and others, we do this kind of discussion and research and reporting, is because we're trying to help God to help us essentially get past all of this nonsense. Eventually, it's going
see
to
a
happen.
major change in you since the last time I talked to you. I mean, last time you couldn't even get this far.
Yeah, I know. I know.
You just couldn't get this far. Now we're talking about all kinds of stuff today that you couldn't have talked about the last time I met with you.
Yeah, well, thank God for God is all I know how to say.
You've come a long way.
Well, we both have. I mean, you have a protocol now that actually works, and you're helping
Yes.
people. And I've had a lot of people ask me, they say I have, voices or attachments or whatever, and I didn't really know how to help them or who to refer them to. So I'll definitely help. I'll send more people to you, and as well as my pastor. I've been telling people, if you want to go down that path, I know it works. It worked for me and my wife. It's not easy, but it works. So anyway, I do appreciate you, Jerry, and I'll send you a copy of this show when I post it tonight.
Send me the downloadable version. I just the regular, the regular version doesn't work. I need the downloadable one.
Okay. All right, I'll do that on a file share. Right.
And yeah, you guys, any of you guys out listening out there, you can go to jerrymarzinski.com. There's hundreds of videos there on this topic. You go to articles, you'll see these patterns there, especially those of you who are working with schizophrenics and mental health. You'll see these for yourself. And if the voices are running patterns, like I said, they cannot be hallucinations, and this flies right in the face of the psychiatric mafia.
Wow. All right. Thanks again, Jerry. It's great seeing you.
Take care. Good to be with you again. It's like old home week.
Yeah. All right. Be well. I'll see you later.
Right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye. Okay. I hope you guys enjoyed that. I did. And where do we go from here? I'm open to suggestions. I do have some guests lined up further, and eventually I'll be doing this live somewhere, streaming it out to whatever, one of the other platforms. But ultimately, you can see here robertstanley.substack.com. However you came to this particular presentation, that's where you go for the rest of the story. Links down below, and ways to contact me or my guests if you so desire. So, thanks again for tuning in. Until next time, may God bless you always and in all ways. Okay.